The ringing of my phone sliced through the quiet luxury of the hotel suite. I glanced at the caller ID. Mother. A familiar dread, cold and heavy, settled in my stomach. Here we go again. Sweetheart, thank goodness you answered. Her voice was a high-pitched squeak, stretched thin with panic. You won't believe what's happened. It's wonderful news, really, a fantastic opportunity, but it's all a bit sudden. I took a slow sip of the lukewarm chamomile tea on the bedside table. What is it, Mother? Well, you know Mr. Henderson, Daddy's business partner? Such a lovely man. And his son, Arthur. He's a wonderful boy, very successful. They were just so impressed with everything, and they made us an offer we simply couldn't refuse. A flash so sharp it made me wince. Not of the camera bulbs that used to follow me, but of a memory. This exact conversation, or one terrifyingly like it. The same saccharine excuses, the same underlying desperation. In my first life, this phone call, this fantastic opportunity, had been the first nail in my coffin. It had led to a disastrous marriage, the crumbling of my spirit, and ultimately my untimely, pathetic end. This time, things would be different. They had to be. They've bought your wedding date, darling, Mother finally blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. For Arthur, isn't that efficient? We get to keep the deposit on the venue, and it helps your father's business immensely. The Hendersons are crucial right now. Sold. Again, the word echoed in the hollow chambers of my past life. Sold like a prize mare, a commodity to secure their shaky finances. My wedding date, the one I hadn't even been consulted on in the first place, now bartered away for the second time. The irony was a bitter pill. So the engagement party is tomorrow night, she continued, her voice gaining a frantic edge. At the Grand Palace Hotel. You remember, the one we always dreamed of for you? It's all arranged. You just need to be here, please, darling. For us, for the family. I looked down at the sleek, cream-colored contract resting on the polished mahogany desk in front of me. The Grand Palace Hotel's logo was embossed at the top. My fingers traced the elegant script. Yes, Mother, I said, my voice surprisingly calm, even to my own ears. I'll be there. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. You're a good girl. You won't regret this. Her relief was a gush of warm air through the phone. I didn't reply. My gaze was fixed on the signature line of the document. It was an order, drafted by my lawyers just this morning. An order to close the Grand Palace Hotel for extensive, immediate, and indefinite renovations, effective as of an hour ago. The cool, smooth barrel of the hotel-provided pen felt steady in my hand. With a decisive flick of my wrist, I signed my name. My new name, the one they didn't know. The name of the sole proprietor of the Grand Palace Hotel. A faint smile touched my lips. In my last life, I thought, the memory a dull ache rather than a fresh wound. They sold me once. This time, I'll let them think they can do it again. The game was afoot, but this time I wasn't just a player. I owned the entire board. And the pieces were finally starting to move according to my design. The memories flooded back, unbidden, as the chauffeured car sped me towards the family home. My previous life, a life of muted compliance and eventual despair. I remembered Clara, my younger sister, with her cherubic face and a heart full of carefully concealed venom. She'd always been the favored one, the one who could do no wrong. It was Clara who had, with practiced innocence, stolen Daniel, my fiancé. He hadn't been much of a prize, a weak-willed man easily swayed by flattery and the promise of a more advantageous connection. But the betrayal had stung nonetheless. He was mine, or so I'd thought. My parents, bless their ambitious hearts, had orchestrated the entire handover. It's for the best, Ilara, Father had said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. That was before I was reborn as Evelyn, a name I chose for its quiet strength. Clara and Daniel are a better match. Besides, Mr. Beaumont, Daniel's father, is considering a significant investment in the company. We can't afford to upset him. My feelings, my future, were irrelevant bargaining chips in their endless game of social and financial climbing. They'd forced me to step aside to smile prettily at their engagement party, to wish them well while my own heart fractured. The humiliation had been a public spectacle, a prelude to my eventual erasure. The car pulled up to the familiar wrought iron gates of our family home. The house wasn't a mansion, not by the standards of the circles they aspired to, but it was large, imposing, and always faintly smelling of my mother's expensive French perfume, clashing with the aroma of whatever ambitious, complicated dish she was attempting in the kitchen, usually with mediocre results. As I stepped out, the scent hit me, a peculiar mix of lily of the valley and overbrowned onions. A wave of nausea, quickly suppressed. I was Evelyn now, stronger, smarter. Clara was the first to greet me at the door, her smile a masterpiece of practiced warmth. "Ellie, you came!" She still called me Ellie, a diminutive I'd always disliked, even more so now. She threw her arms around me in a hug that felt more like a vice. Her nails, perfectly manicured and a blood red, dug into my arm. "Congratulations!" she whispered, her breath sweet with a hint of mint and malice. "Arthur Henderson is quite the catch. You've done well for yourself. Finally." The dig was subtle, but it landed. Finally. As if my previous engagement, the one she'd so expertly sabotaged, had been a childish fancy. I pulled back, offering a serene smile of my own. "Thank you, Clara. He seems suitable." Father was in his study, a room paneled in dark wood that always felt oppressive. He didn't rise when I entered. "Elara?" he said, his tone businesslike, as if discussing a quarterly report. "Good of you to see sense. This engagement to Arthur Henderson is a pivotal moment for the family. His father is on the verge of signing the merger agreement. Your cooperation is expected." Not requested, never requested. My opinion was a ghost in this house, unseen, unheard. "Of course, Father," I replied, my voice a model of demure obedience. "I understand the importance of family duty." The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I swallowed them down. Patience. It was all about patience. Later, during a stilted pre-dinner drink session in the living room, Arthur Henderson himself made his appearance, alongside his portly, beaming father. Arthur was a few years older than me, with slicked back hair that looked like it might crack if he smiled too widely, and eyes that roamed over me with an unnerving possessiveness. He was the kind of man who considered women decorative accessories, to be chosen for their ability to reflect well on him. "Elara," he said, his voice a low drawl that he probably thought was charming. He took my hand, his touch clammy, and brought it to his lips. I had to fight the urge to snatch it away and wipe it on my dress. "A pleasure. I've heard so much about you." He leered, a slow, unpleasant smile spreading across his face. "Your parents tell me you're very accommodating. We're both busy people, of course, but I'm sure we can be flexible with the wedding date. Make it work for everyone's convenience." His words were a clear indication of how this was going to go. My convenience wouldn't feature. I was a transaction, and he was already assessing his purchase. I gave a non-committal nod. "Flexibility is always good in business, Arthur." The doorbell rang again. My mother, flustered and beaming, ushered in another guest. My heart clenched. Serena, my former best friend. The Serena who, in my past life, had stood by and watched Clara dismantle my happiness, offering sympathetic sighs while secretly relaying every one of my tearful confidences back to my sister. She'd chosen her side, aligning herself with the perceived winners. Now, here she was, her eyes wide with a carefully constructed innocence, a brightly wrapped gift in her hands. "Ellie! Oh, darling, I'm so thrilled for you." She rushed forward, embracing me with an enthusiasm that felt utterly false. "Arthur is a wonderful man. You deserve this happiness." Her perfume, something cloyingly sweet, mingled with the already overwhelming scents in the room. I felt a tremor in my hands, a faint echo of the helpless rage I'd experienced so many times before. But I kept my smile firmly in place. "Serena, how lovely of you to come." I even managed a light, airy tone. Inside, the ice was spreading. While they all played their parts, I discreetly pulled out my phone, hidden by the folds of my skirt, and sent a quick text to my lawyer. "Proceed with phase 1. Keep me updated." My mother, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension that only I seemed to perceive, then decided it was the perfect moment to unveil her latest plans. She bustled over with a stack of glossy brochures. Look, darling, wedding venues. I know the Hendersons are keen on the Grand Palace, and honestly, so am I. It's just so regal. She fanned them out on the coffee table. The centerpiece brochure, of course, was for the Grand Palace Hotel. My Grand Palace Hotel. The images showed its opulent ballroom, its sweeping marble staircases, its manicured gardens. The very place where tomorrow they planned to announce my engagement to Arthur. The very place that was, at this exact moment, being stripped of its accessibility to them. It's beautiful, Mother, I said, my voice soft. I picked up the brochure, my fingers brushing against the image of the grand entrance. Truly a dream. Just as Arthur was about to make some remark about how his father could probably buy out the entire hotel if he wished, the doorbell chimed once more. This time, it wasn't someone my mother was expecting. The housekeeper, looking slightly bewildered, announced, "Madam, there's a Mr. Sterling here to see Miss Alara." All heads turned. I allowed a small, perfectly calibrated expression of surprise to cross my face, though my heart gave a little leap. He was early, or perhaps perfectly on time. Into the suddenly silent room strode a man who seemed to suck all the available oxygen with him. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of understated European elegance, not the flashy labels my father and Mr. Henderson favored. His dark hair was casually styled, and his eyes, a startling shade of sapphire blue, held an unnervingly intelligent gleam. He moved with a quiet confidence that made Arthur Henderson look like a preening peacock. "Alara," he said, his voice a smooth baritone that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. He smiled, a genuine, devastating smile that didn't quite reach his watchful eyes. "Forgive my intrusion. I was just in the neighborhood and wanted to drop off those preliminary reports we discussed." He held out a slim leather portfolio. My family stared, open-mouthed. Clara's eyes narrowed. Arthur looked momentarily deflated, his proprietary air faltering. I rose, my earlier tremor gone, replaced by a newfound steadiness. "Mr. Sterling, how kind of you to come all this way." I took the portfolio. "Everyone," I said, turning to my bewildered family and their guests, "this is Mr. Julian Sterling, my new business partner." The silence that followed was thick enough to spread on toast. Julian Sterling, a name none of them recognized, a handsome, powerful stranger who had just inserted himself into their carefully constructed narrative. And he had called me Alara, yes, but the way he said it, the way he looked at me, suggested he knew far more than they could possibly imagine. My father was the first to recover, his businessman's instincts kicking in. "Sterling, I don't believe we've had the pleasure." "What, business are you in, Mr. Sterling?" Julian's smile widened, but it didn't lose its edge. "Oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that," he said vaguely, his gaze sweeping over them before returning to me. "But mostly, I invest in potential. And Alara," he paused, his eyes locking with mine, "has a great deal of it." The air crackled. My mother looked faint. Clara looked furious. Arthur looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. I, however, felt a thrill of anticipation. The first piece had been moved. Their carefully planned engagement party was about to hit its first, rather significant snag. The days leading up to the engagement party were a masterclass in family pressure. My parents, egged on by the Hendersons, were adamant. The announcement had to be at the Grand Palace Hotel. It was a statement, they insisted, a symbol of their merging dynasties, or so they romantically and delusionally framed it. Any other venue was simply unacceptable. "Alara, you must understand," my father had boomed during one particularly tense dinner, his face flushed. "The Hendersons have expectations. We have expectations. The Grand Palace is non-negotiable." Mother wrung her hands. "Think of the guests, darling. We've already hinted at the venue. It would be so embarrassing to change it now." Clara, ever the helpful sister, chimed in. "Don't be difficult, Ellie. It's the perfect place. So grand. You wouldn't want to start your new life with Arthur by causing unnecessary problems, would you?" Her eyes glittered with a challenge. I feigned reluctance, sighing dramatically. It's just, it's such a grand place, Father. So expensive. Are you sure? I let a little quiver enter my voice. And managing the booking for such a prestigious venue, and it's a lot of pressure. This was the opening they were waiting for. Nonsense, Mr. Henderson Sr. declared, who had conveniently joined us for this strategic family dinner. Money is no object for an event of this importance. As for the booking, my secretary can handle it. Or perhaps Alara would like to. Show a little initiative, eh? He winked at Arthur, who smirked. I appeared to consider this, biting my lip. Well, I said slowly, if you're all so set on it, perhaps it would be best if I handled the venue booking myself. That way, I can ensure all our specific requirements are met, and it would be my contribution, a way to show Arthur and his family how much this means to me. I looked suitably earnest, my eyes wide. My mother beamed. Oh, darling, that's wonderful. So thoughtful. Father nodded, mollified. Good. See to it then, Alara. Don't disappoint us. They had no idea. The Grand Palace Hotel had been mine for weeks now, purchased discreetly through a series of shell corporations meticulously set up by Julian's legal team. They thought they were forcing my hand. In reality, they were walking straight into my beautifully laid trap. The next morning, I had a secret meeting. Not with some anonymous events coordinator, but with Mr. Alastair Finch, the long-standing general manager of the Grand Palace. He was a man of impeccable discretion and old-world charm, who had been thoroughly vetted and, more importantly, was now on my payroll, his loyalty secured by a contract that ensured his comfortable retirement. Provided he followed my instructions to the letter, he greeted me not in his public office, but in the private owner's suite, a lavish set of rooms I hadn't even known existed until the deeds were signed. Madam Owner, he said, bowing slightly, his expression perfectly grave. Your instructions regarding the renovations have been fully implemented. All public bookings for the foreseeable future have been canceled and attributed to unforeseen structural issues. The staff has been briefed. Excellent, Alistair, I said, sinking into a plush velvet armchair. The suite overlooked the main gardens, the very ones my mother had cooed over in the brochure. And the signage? Prominently displayed at all entrances, madam, closed indefinitely for essential renovations. We've also had a few strategically placed leaks to the society pages about the scale of the work. It's generated quite a buzz, actually. People are already speculating about the grand reopening. I smiled. Perfect. I walked through a portion of my property later that day, unseen by any prying eyes. The usually bustling lobby was deserted, roped off with velvet cords. The cool marble floors echoed with my solitary footsteps. The grand ballroom, where my humiliation was supposed to have been announced, was dark and silent. Dust sheets draped over the chandeliers. I could almost hear their gasps, envision their panicked faces when they arrived to find their grand plans in ruins. The thought sent a shiver of pure, unadulterated satisfaction through me. The day of the planned engagement party arrived. My mother was in a flurry of excitement, directing caterers who weren't coming, and florists who had no flowers to deliver to the Grand Palace. Clara was preening in a new designer dress, no doubt expecting to be the belle of the ball, even if it was ostensibly my party. Father and Mr. Henderson were already mentally counting the profits from their merger. I let them go on. I feigned a headache, saying I'd meet them at the venue a little later, wanting to make a grand entrance with Arthur. He, of course, lapped this up. The first call came an hour later than I expected. It was my mother, her voice tight with disbelief and rising hysteria. Alara, you won't believe this. The Grand Palace, it's closed. They're saying it's for renovations. Indefinitely. What are we going to do? All our guests are arriving. I let out a perfectly pitched gasp. Closed? Oh, no. But I had the confirmation. Let me call them. I made a show of fumbling with my phone. After a moment, I said, their lines are all going to an automated message. This is a disaster. Then came Clara, her voice shrill. This is your fault, Ellie. You were supposed to handle the booking. How could you mess this up so badly? We look like fools. Father's call was next, his voice a low growl of fury. Alara, fix this, now. I don't care how. The Hendersons are furious. This merger is on the line. Panic. Beautiful, glorious panic. It was music to my ears. I waited a suitable interval, letting them stew in their self-inflicted crisis. Then, I called my mother back, my voice laced with carefully rehearsed distress. Mother, I am so sorry. I don't know what happened with the Grand Palace, but I might have a solution. A friend of mine. She owns a small restaurant. It's not the palace, of course, but it's quite charming. And she said she can accommodate us on short notice. It's called the Little Orchard. Perhaps it could work. The Little Orchard was, of course, another of my recent discreet acquisitions. A cozy, rustic, and decidedly modest establishment in a less fashionable part of town. Utterly unsuitable for the grand society event they had envisioned. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, a sputtering, a small restaurant? Lara, are you insane? What will people think? Mother, I said, my voice trembling slightly. It's either that or we cancel everything and send everyone home. At least this way, we can still have the announcement. Please. It's the best I can do. Desperate, with guests already milling about aimlessly outside the locked gates of the Grand Palace, they had no choice but to agree. The news was relayed. Directions were hastily given. The scene at the Little Orchard was everything I had hoped for. High society guests, dressed in their finest silks and jewels, found themselves crammed into a space that could comfortably seat 50, not the 200 they had invited. Waiters, hastily retrained from their usual bistro service, struggled to navigate the throng with trays of cheap Prosecco and canapes that were more rustic than refined. The Hendersons looked aghast. Their business partners, whom they had been so keen to impress, whispered amongst themselves, casting doubtful glances at my father and his supposed affluence. The carefully crafted image of the prosperous, well-connected family was crumbling before their very eyes, one dropped vol au vent at a time. My father's face was a mask of thunder. My mother looked like she was about to weep into her wilting corsage. Clara was shooting daggers at me from across the crowded room. Later, as I stood by the slightly too small coat check, pretending to look for a misplaced wrap, Clara cornered me. Her smile was gone, replaced by a snarl. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in painfully, just like at the house. "What did you do, Ellie?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "This is a catastrophe. You're embarrassing the family. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" I met her gaze, my own expression one of wide-eyed innocence. "Doing what, Clara? I'm just trying to make the best of a bad situation. The Grand Palace closing wasn't my fault. I found an alternative. Isn't that what you wanted? You enjoy this, don't you?" She seethed, her perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. "Seeing us all humiliated?" I gently extricated my arm from her grasp. "Clara, darling," I said, my voice soft but firm, "the only person embarrassing the family right now is you, making a scene. Perhaps you should go and check on Mother. She looks a little, overwhelmed." Clara stared at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine for any flicker of triumph. I gave her nothing but serene, unshakable calm. With a frustrated huff, she turned on her heel and stormed off. I watched her go, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. Round one, to me. They thought they had problems now. They had no idea what was coming next. The beauty of silent revenge was its subtlety. They wouldn't see the blade until it was already at their throats, and I was just getting started. The fallout from the engagement party debacle was swift and messy. My mother took to her bed with a migraine, which was her code for acute social humiliation. My father alternated between stony silence and explosive tirades about incompetence, aimed vaguely in my direction, but mostly at the universe for daring to inconvenience him. Clara sulked, convinced I had orchestrated the Grand Palace's closure, though she had no proof. Arthur Henderson, to my surprise and slight amusement, seemed more put out by the quality of the canapes at the Little Orchard than the potential damage to his family's reputation. His priorities, it seemed, were firmly rooted in his stomach. A week later, my mother, miraculously recovered from her migraine, now that the initial sting of embarrassment had faded into a dull ache of resentment, decided to take matters into her own hands. She and Clara, clearly in cahoots, went behind my back to plan an elaborate wedding dress shopping expedition. This wasn't just about finding a dress, it was about salvaging their social standing. They invited a gaggle of their most influential and gossipy business connections' wives and daughters, intending to showcase their impeccable taste and, by extension, their enduring status, despite the recent unfortunate incident with the venue. I discovered their plans quite by accident, of course, a misplaced itinerary left on the hall table. A hushed phone call I overheard. They had booked out the entire afternoon at Madame Evangeline's Couture Bridal, the most exclusive and outrageously expensive bridal salon in the city. And how had they secured such a prestigious booking at short notice? By using my supplementary credit card, the one father had insisted I have for emergencies and maintaining the family image. They had grandly told Madame Evangeline to reserve her entire new collection for Miss Ilara Vance, soon to be Mrs. Arthur Henderson. The weight of the sleek, black, unlimited credit card felt cool and powerful in my palm. It was a symbol of their assumptions, their entitlement. They believed they still controlled my finances, my choices, my life. They were about to receive another sharp lesson. I made a single phone call, not to Madame Evangeline directly, that would be too crude. Instead, I called the bank that issued the card, my voice a mask of polite concern. "Hello? This is Evelyn Reed," I said, using my real name, the one tied to my actual substantial bank accounts, not the allowance-based identity of Ilara Vance. I seem to have misplaced one of my supplementary cards. Card number ending in 7,890 under the name Ilara Vance. Yes, that's the one. Could you please cancel it immediately and flag any attempted transactions? Thank you so much. The next afternoon, as my mother, Clara, and their entourage of socialites swept into Madame Evangeline's opulent salon, they were met not with fawning attendants and racks of glittering gowns, but with a flustered Madame Evangeline herself, wringing her hands. "Mrs. Vance! Miss Vance! There seems to be a problem with the card on file. It has been declined." The collective gasp was audible even in my imagination. My mother's face, I was later told by a delighted Serena, who, it turned out, was far more loyal to juicy gossip than to Clara, went a startling shade of puce. Clara tried to bluster, pulling out her own card, only to be informed that the reservation for the entire collection required the pre-authorized card or a substantial new deposit they simply didn't have on hand without access to my funds. When confronted later that evening, I appeared suitably upset and bewildered. My credit card canceled? Oh, goodness, that must be why some of my online subscriptions failed this morning. I'll have to call the bank. How dreadful. I'm so sorry, Mother Clara. Did you at least find some lovely dresses to look at? My innocent expression was flawless. My mother was practically vibrating with suppressed fury. Look at? Ilara, we were humiliated. In front of everyone. Madame Evangeline could only offer us a few sample dresses from last season. They were de mode. The horror in her voice at the thought of outdated fashion was almost comical. I sighed, dabbing at a non-existent tear. This is all so stressful. Perhaps we should try a smaller boutique? I know a little place, the Gilded Thimble. It's not as famous as Madame Evangeline's, but I hear they have some unique pieces. Very vintage. And so, the following day, a much-reduced and considerably less enthusiastic party found themselves at the Gilded Thimble. This boutique, unlike Madame Evangeline's, was indeed one of my properties, acquired just last month. The unique pieces were, in fact, a carefully curated collection of the most unflattering, outdated, and frankly bizarre wedding dresses I could find. Think mountains of synthetic taffeta, unfortunate shades of puce and beige, and enough superfluous ruffles to outfit a flamenco troupe. The flush of red that crept up my mother's neck as she surveyed the offerings was a sight to behold, even relayed secondhand. Her dreams of a glorious fashion parade, of reasserting her social dominance through the proxy of my wedding dress, were turning to dust. She couldn't very well storm out without causing yet another scene, especially after the Madame Evangeline fiasco. My father, who usually remained aloof from such feminine concerns, cornered me that evening. His face was grim. Ilara, this string of misfortunes is becoming problematic. The Hendersons are starting to ask questions. Arthur's mother made a comment about our family's stability. Father, I don't know what to say, I murmured, looking down at my hands. It feels like everything is going wrong. Then you must make it right, he snapped. This merger with Henderson Global is vital to the survival of Vance Industries. Your marriage is the bedrock of that deal. You must sacrifice for the family. You must ensure this wedding goes smoothly. No more incidents. His words, sacrifice for the family, echoed from my past life. Always me sacrificing, never them. Mr. Henderson Sr., a man not known for his subtlety, also began to voice his concerns more openly. During a tense meeting at my father's office, which I was summoned to attend, presumably as a silent, reassuring presence, he'd remarked, "Frankly, Charles, these recent hiccups make one wonder. Is everything quite as it seems with your financial footing? The Grand Palace, the dress business? Small things, perhaps, but they add up." My father blustered, assuring him that these were minor, unrelated annoyances. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The carefully constructed facade of Vance prosperity was beginning to crack. This was my cue. Later that day, during a family crisis meeting, another one, I broke down. Tears, real this time, summoned with the memory of past pains, streamed down my face. "I can't do this," I wailed, my voice choked with sobs. "It's too much pressure. Everything is going wrong." Maybe we should postpone the engagement, the wedding. I'm clearly not capable of handling it. I'm jinxing everything." I made sure to look utterly weak, overwhelmed, and on the verge of a complete collapse. My parents exchanged alarmed glances. Postponement was the last thing they wanted. It would look like an admission of failure, of deeper problems. Arthur, who had been summoned to witness my meltdown, looked vaguely uncomfortable, as if confronted with an overly emotional pet. "Nonsense, Alara," my father said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. "You're just stressed. We all are. We'll simplify things." I shook my head, sobbing harder. "No, you don't understand. I'm bringing bad luck to this. It's a sign." I let them fuss and flounder, offering platitudes and reassurances that rang hollow even to their own ears. I appeared inconsolable, planting the idea that perhaps I was the unstable element, the one derailing their grand plans through sheer incompetence and ill fortune. Let them think that. It was far less dangerous than them suspecting the truth. As I finally allowed myself to be calmed, retreating to my room with feigned exhaustion, my phone buzzed. A text message from an encrypted number. Julian Sterling. It read simply, "Phase 2 completed. They are rattled. Phase 3 ready when you are, Evelyn." A small, cold smile touched my lips. Rattled was an understatement, and I was more than ready for Phase 3. The game was escalating, and the stakes were about to get much, much higher. Their precious merger, their social standing, their carefully constructed lies, all of it was teetering on the brink. And I was the one who would give the final decisive push. The solution my parents came up with, after my carefully orchestrated breakdown, was to take even more control. They announced, without any prior consultation with me, that they had set the official wedding date. It was to be in 3 months' time. A lavish affair, naturally, though the venue was still a point of panicked contention since the Grand Palace was unavailable. "We decided it's best to move forward decisively, Alara," my father declared, his tone brokering no dissent. "No more dithering. The Hendersons agree. A fixed date will provide stability." They threw a small, impromptu celebration at home to mark this decisive step. More cheap champagne, more forced smiles. During a particularly insincere toast from Arthur about our glorious future, Clara, clumsy or malicious I couldn't tell, bumped my arm. Champagne, sticky and cloying, spilled down the front of my silk dress. "Oh, Ellie, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with fake concern. The familiar sensation of being subtly undermined, of being a target for their careless aggressions, washed over me. I just smiled, a tight, strained thing. "It's quite all right, Clara. Accidents happen." I appeared resigned to their plans, outwardly compliant. "If the date is set, then it's set," I said quietly, projecting an air of weary acceptance. My only request, if it's not too much trouble, is that I choose the honeymoon location myself. A little something to look forward to. My mother, relieved by my apparent acquiescence, readily agreed. Of course, darling. That's a wonderful idea. You choose anywhere you like. She probably envisioned me picking some vapid, Instagrammable beach resort. She had no idea my travel plans involved boardrooms and hostel takeovers. The next day, I wasn't browse travel brochures. I was in a secure, anonymous office in the city's financial district, meeting with a team of discreet financial analysts and corporate lawyers, all contacts Julian had cultivated, men and women who owed him significant favors from his complex dealings in this new life he was helping me navigate. A life where I was no longer just a Lara Vance, but Evelyn Reed, a silent, emerging power. The quiet hum of computers filled the room. Charts and figures glowed on oversized screens. With calm precision, I authorized a series of large-scale fund transfers. Money I had patiently, painstakingly accumulated in my new life, profits from investments made with the foreknowledge of my past existence, now flowed into designated accounts. The objective, to acquire a controlling interest in Vance Industries, my father's struggling company. He was so focused on the Henderson merger as his lifeline that he'd become blind to other vulnerabilities, other players in the market, players like me. The beeping of a final computer confirmation was soft, almost anticlimactic, given the magnitude of that transaction. It was done. I now owned more than 51% of Vance Industries. My father was effectively my employee. He just didn't know it yet. The first ripple effect of my move came a week later. Arthur Henderson was abruptly, inexplicably, fired from his senior position at Henderson Global. There was no warning, no explanation offered by his father, just a terse internal memo announcing his immediate departure. The Henderson family, from what Julian's sources indicated, was thrown into turmoil. Arthur was, despite his lecherous nature, his father's chosen heir. His dismissal was a shockwave. My family's reaction was pure, unadulterated horror. The Hendersons were their golden ticket. If Arthur was out, what did that mean for the merger? For my wedding? My mother was hysterical. Alara, you have to do something. Arthur's been fired. Mr. Henderson won't take our calls. This is a disaster. You have connections now with that Mr. Sterling. Surely he knows people. You have to fix this. Father, for once, looked truly shaken, his usual bluster deflated. Your mother is right, Alara. This is catastrophic. If the Hendersons pull out, Vance Industries is finished. We are finished. You must speak to your fiancé, find out what happened, use your influence. My influence. They still had no idea. I feigned distress, wringing my hands. Fired? Oh, Arthur, but why? I'll call him immediately, and yes, I can. I can ask Mr. Sterling if he's heard anything. I did call Arthur. He was a blubbering, incoherent mess, railing about betrayal and injustice. He had no clue why he'd been ousted. He certainly couldn't help them. Then I played my next card. I announced to my stunned family that I had arranged a special pre-wedding business presentation. A gesture of goodwill, I called it, to showcase the strengths of Vance Industries and to reassure the Hendersons and our other key partners about our future stability. A presentation? Arranged by you? Father asked, suspicion warring with desperation in his eyes. Yes, I said brightly, and I've managed to secure a wonderful venue, the Grand Palace Hotel. A collective gasp. But it's closed for renovations, Clara exclaimed. I smiled serenely. It seems my new business partner, Mr. Sterling, has some pull. He managed to arrange for the main ballroom to be made available for our exclusive use for one afternoon. A special preview, if you will, before it officially reopens under new management. The day of the presentation arrived. I had insisted my family arrive early to ensure everything is perfect. As their car pulled up to the familiar, imposing facade of the Grand Palace, they saw something new. Something that made my father's jaw drop and my mother's hand fly to her mouth. Where the old, discreet Grand Palace insignia used to be, there was now a gleaming modern logo. Sleek silver lettering that spelled out Reed International Holdings. My company logo. Their shock was palpable. Before they could fully process this, a stream of expensive cars began to arrive, disgorging the very business partners and society figures they had been so desperate to impress, the Hendersons, looking grim and confused, their key investors, city council members, and various other luminaries. But as my father, mother, and Clara, dressed in their finest, moved to enter the hotel they believed they were hosting an event in, they were met by a line of stern-faced security guards in crisp Reed International uniforms. "I'm sorry, sir, madam," one of the guards said, his voice polite but firm, holding up a hand to block my father's path. "Your names are not on the guest list for today's Reed International presentation." "Not on the list," father spluttered, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Don't be ridiculous. I am Charles Vance. This is my daughter's event. We are hosting this." The guard remained impassive. "The host of today's event is Miss Evelyn Reed, CEO of Reed International. Only invited guests may enter." Just then, a gleaming black limousine with tinted windows purred to a halt at the red carpet that had been laid out. The guards straightened, their demeanor shifting to one of utmost respect. A chauffeur hurried to open the rear door. And out stepped me. Not Ilara Vance, the demure, downtrodden daughter, but Evelyn Reed, poised, confident, dressed in a sharply tailored power suit that cost more than my father's annual salary. My hair was styled differently, my makeup more defined. I looked every inch the CEO. The guards nodded respectfully as I approached. "Miss Reed, welcome." I paused at the entrance, turning to look at my dumbstruck family, still barred from entry, their faces a mixture of disbelief, dawning horror, and utter confusion. Mr. Henderson Sr. was staring at me as if he'd seen a ghost. I offered them a small, cool smile. "Father, Mother, Clara." My voice was clear, carrying in the sudden hush. "So sorry you're late, but don't worry, I'll be sure to fill you in on everything you missed." Then, without a backward glance, I swept past the guards into the magnificent lobby of my hotel, leaving them standing on the curb, denied entry to their own daughter's triumphant unveiling. The expressions on their faces were a masterpiece of thwarted ambition and dawning realization. The ground beneath their feet wasn't just shaking anymore. It had completely given way. The grand ballroom of the palace, now Reed International, was filled with a hushed, expectant crowd. Business leaders, investors, city officials, the creme de la creme of the city's power players, all drawn by the mystery and sudden emergence of Reed International and its enigmatic CEO. I stood at the podium, the Reed International logo projected impressively behind me. Julian Sterling was seated in the front row, a subtle, supportive presence. "Good afternoon, everyone," I began, my voice calm and assured, resonating through the excellent sound system I'd had installed. "Welcome to the unveiling of Reed International's latest acquisition and our vision for the future." I paused, my gaze sweeping across the room, briefly meeting the bewildered eyes of Mr. Henderson Sr. A future that, I'm pleased to announce, will also involve a significant majority shareholding in Henderson Global. A wave of murmurs rippled through the audience. Mr. Henderson Sr.'s face went white. His son, Arthur, had been fired not as a prelude to the merger's collapse, but as a condition of its new reality, a reality where I was in control. The acquisition of Henderson Global shares had been the other half of my financial maneuvering, a silent coup executed in parallel with the Vance Industries takeover. I let the implications sink in before continuing. Many of you are wondering who Evelyn Reed is. Where did Reed International come from? It's a fair question. This was the moment for the first reveal. Not the full story, not yet, but enough to shatter their preconceptions. "Some of you," I said, my eyes finding a few familiar faces in the crowd, older business associates of my father, "may remember me as Ilara Vance." Another ripple, stronger this time. Whispers of Vance's daughter could be heard. The Ilara Vance you knew, or thought you knew, was a construct, a role I played. The truth is far more unconventional. And then I allowed a glimpse into the impossible. Not in full, vivid detail, for who would believe the true fantastical nature of my rebirth? But I hinted at it, clothed in the language of near-death experiences and second chances. Imagine, if you will, a life lived once, poorly. A life of missed opportunities, of betrayals, of being undervalued. My voice was even, but a flicker of the old pain, the catalyst for my return, touched my tone. And then imagine being granted an opportunity to reevaluate, to start again, armed with the knowledge of past mistakes, not just your own, but those of others. A flashback, sharp and visceral, seared through my mind, a memory I rarely allowed myself to revisit. The darkness after my death in that previous pathetic life, the cold, the despair, and then a presence. Not a person, not a thing, but an entity, a being of immense ancient power, shimmering at the edges of my perception. It hadn't spoken in words, but in pure understanding, infused directly into my shattered consciousness. A second chance? The offer had been clear, resonating through the void. Return with what you know, change your fate, change theirs. The price? Unspoken, but understood. I wouldn't be the same. The old Ilara would be truly gone, replaced by something, someone, forged in the crucible of death and regret. I remembered the tingling sensation that had spread across my non-existent skin as I'd accepted, a feeling of being simultaneously unmade and remade. The deal was struck. I would return my memories, my knowledge of their schemes, their weaknesses, their future failings, all intact. In this new life, I continued, pulling myself back to the present, the ballroom, the sea of faces, I chose a different path. While my family believed I was studying abroad, ostensibly finding myself after a series of personal disappointments. Disappointments they largely orchestrated. I was, in fact, building. Silently, meticulously. I gestured around the opulent ballroom. Reed International is the culmination of those years of work. An empire built on foresight, on understanding market vulnerabilities, on learning from the past. My gaze drifted towards the entrance of the ballroom. My security chief, a stoic woman named Miss Albright, gave a subtle nod. On cue, the grand doors at the back of the ballroom opened. And there stood my family, Charles, Eleanor, and Clara Vance. Not as guests of honor, but as exhibits. Flanked by more security, they were ushered to a small, isolated seating area at the very back, almost out of sight, but visible enough for the drama to unfold. Their faces were a study in shock and dawning comprehension. The trap wasn't just sprung, it was on public display. I watched them for a moment before turning back to my audience. My family, I said, my voice devoid of warmth, played a significant role in my education. They taught me invaluable lessons about ambition, betrayal, and the lengths people will go to for self-preservation. This was the cue for the next reveal, the confessions. Not from me, but from them, or rather, confessions about them. Let's start with the most recent deceptions, I said, my tone becoming icier. The planned marriage between myself and Arthur Henderson, a union my parents were so desperate to secure. Why such desperation? My eyes landed on Clara. She looked like a cornered animal. Under the intense scrutiny, under the weight of my unblinking stare and the murmurs of the crowd, she began to unravel. The carefully constructed facade of the favored daughter crumbled. It wasn't just about a good match, Clara suddenly cried out, her voice cracking, rising in hysteria from the back of the room. All heads turned towards her. We had to. The company, Vance Industries. It was on the verge of bankruptcy. Father had made some terrible investments. We were losing everything. Your marriage to Arthur, his father's money, it was the only thing that could save us. Her confession, raw and desperate, hung in the air. So, the dutiful daughter facade was a lie to cover their impending financial ruin. My mother was next. Tears streamed down her face, the harsh lights of the ballroom reflecting off them like shattered diamonds. "She's right," she sobbed, her voice a pathetic wail. "We were desperate. But it wasn't just the money, Alara. Evelyn, I was always so jealous of you. Even when you were a child, things came so easily to you. The intelligence, the composure. I was never that smart, never that graceful. I wanted Clara to have what I couldn't, to be the one who shone brighter. I pushed her. I favored her. I see now. I see how wrong I was. Her confession was a torrent of envy and regret, a lifetime of bitterness spilling out. Then all eyes turned to my father. He sat ramrod straight, his face ashen, but his pride still flickering. He wouldn't break as easily. "And father," I said, my voice like a steel blade, "your contribution to this family saga? Perhaps you'd care to enlighten our guests about the creative accounting practices at Vance Industries? The funds quietly siphoned off over the years? The reason the company was really on the brink, beyond just bad investments." He stared at me, his jaw working. He knew I knew. The evidence was irrefutable. Julian's forensic accountants had been meticulous. Finally, his shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him. "Embezzlement," he muttered, the word barely audible, yet it echoed through the silent ballroom like a thunderclap. "Years ago. Small amounts at first, then more. I always intended to pay it back. But things spiraled. Your marriage to Arthur? It wasn't just about saving the company. It was about avoiding criminal charges. Henderson Sr. had connections. He could have made it all go away if the merger went through, if we were family. The full, ugly truth was out. Bankruptcy, jealousy, embezzlement. My entire life, my worth, bartered and sold to cover their sins, their failures, their greed. Then came the biggest twist of the afternoon, one even I hadn't fully anticipated, though Julian had hinted at his own complex game. Mr. Henderson Sr. rose slowly to his feet, his face a mask of grim understanding. He looked not at my family, but at me. "Miss Reed, Ilara, I must confess this has been illuminating. Perhaps more than you know." He paused, then continued, his voice gaining strength. "I was aware of Mr. Vance's financial irregularities and his desperate attempts to secure my investment through this marriage. What you may not know is that your Mr. Sterling approached me some months ago. He made certain propositions. He suggested I play along, observe. He told me a remarkable young woman was about to turn the tables on a great many people, and that Henderson Global might benefit from being on the right side of that equation when the dust settled." My eyes met Julian's. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He hadn't just been my ally, he'd been testing my family, testing me, playing his own long game. He knew my true identity, my capabilities, far earlier than I had realized. He hadn't just invested in my potential, he had actively orchestrated a scenario to allow it to fully bloom, clearing obstacles and, apparently, making side deals of his own. The warmth of the late afternoon sun streamed through the tall palace windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, highlighting the stunned faces of the guests, the shattered remnants of my family. "It seems, Mr. Henderson," I said, a new respect for Julian dawning, "that we both have an interest in strong, transparent partnerships. Perhaps Reed International and Henderson Global can indeed forge a prosperous future together, on new terms, of course." He nodded slowly. "I believe we can, Miss Reed. I believe we can." My family watched this exchange, their last hope, their belief that Henderson might still be their savior, visibly dying. They were utterly defeated, exposed, and alone. But I wasn't quite finished. There was one final piece of leverage. One last turn of the screw. "Thank you all for your attention," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "This concludes the formal presentation." I stepped away from the podium. As the guests began to stir, to whisper, to process the bombshells that had been dropped, I walked slowly towards my family. They looked up at me, their faces etched with a mixture of fear, despair, and a dawning, horrified respect. I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket, the jacket that represented my new power, my new identity. I pulled out a crisp, white envelope. The weight of it was insignificant, but its contents were heavy indeed. "There's just one more thing," I said, my voice soft, for their ears only, yet carrying the weight of ultimate judgment. "The evidence of your past crimes, Father. The detailed accounts, the offshore trails, the witness statements. Everything the authorities will need." I held it out, not to them, but for them to see. The final, irrefutable proof of their downfall held in my steady hand. The choice of what to do with it was mine, and mine alone. The game was over. Checkmate. The grand ballroom, once filled with the buzz of industry titans and social elites, was now nearly empty. The guests had dispersed, reeling from the revelations, eager to spread the scandalous news. Only my family remained, huddled together in their designated corner of shame, the vast, opulent space now serving as a gilded cage for their despair. Julian had discreetly withdrawn, leaving me to deliver the final act of this long-playing drama. Miss Albright and two other security personnel stood impassively by the main doors, a silent testament to my control. My father, Charles Vance, a man whose arrogance had always seemed unshakable, was the first to break completely. He slid from his chair, his expensive suit crumpling, and landed heavily on his knees before me. The sound echoed unnervingly on the polished marble floors. "Ilara, Evelyn, please." His voice was a ragged whisper, stripped of all its former authority. "Don't do this. We're your family." My mother followed suit, her sobs a wretched counterpoint to his pleas. "Forgive us, darling. We were wrong, so terribly wrong. We'll do anything you ask." She reached out a trembling hand as if to touch the hem of my suit, but seemed to think better of it. Clara, ever the survivor, remained seated, but her face was pale, her eyes wide with a fear I had never seen in them before. Even her venom seemed to have deserted her. The hollow echo of their pleas seemed to mock the grandeur of the ballroom. Marble and crystal reflected their pathetic, diminished forms. I looked down at them, my expression unreadable. The envelope containing the evidence of my father's embezzlement felt cool and smooth in my hand. "No," I said, my voice calm, devoid of triumph or anger. "Just a simple factual statement." My father's head jerked up. "No? But why? We're begging you." "I might have considered forgiveness," I explained, my gaze sweeping over their kneeling forms. "If you had shown a shred of genuine remorse before you were caught. If, at any point in my previous life, or even in this one, before your world came crashing down, you had simply apologized. Apologized for the pain, for the manipulation, for selling me twice, for your own selfish ends." I paused. "But you didn't. You only beg now because you are beaten, because you have no other cards to play." Clara finally spoke, her voice thin and reedy. I'll break up with Daniel," she offered, as if this were some grand sacrifice. "I never really loved him anyway. He was just convenient for mother and father's plans. If that's what you want, I'll tell him it's over. I'll tell everyone it was my fault." A genuine laugh escaped me then, short and devoid of humor. It startled them. "Daniel?" I said, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. "Oh, Clara, you still don't understand. I never wanted Daniel, not really. He was a symptom, not the disease. What I wanted, what I've always wanted, was my freedom. Freedom from all of you. Freedom to be myself, not the pawn you tried to make me." My father looked up, a desperate hope dawning in his eyes. Then, the evidence. I looked at the envelope in my hand. For a moment, I considered its power, the power to destroy him utterly, to see him jailed. It was a tempting thought, a fitting end to his reign of casual cruelty. But then, I thought of the true cost of such a public downfall, the endless legal battles, the media circus, the way it would continue to tie me to them, to their narrative. "My freedom," I said slowly, "also means freedom from the burden of your past. Carrying this, pursuing this, would keep me tethered to your sordid affairs." I met his gaze. "No, father, I won't be handing this to the authorities." A collective sigh of relief, so profound it was almost a gasp, escaped them. My mother started to weep again, this time with what sounded like genuine gratitude. "However," I continued, my voice hardening slightly and their fragile hope wavered, "that does not mean there are no consequences. Reed International now owns Vance Industries. As the majority shareholder, I will be restructuring. Your services, father, will no longer be required. You will resign, effective immediately, citing personal reasons. You will receive a modest severance, enough to live on, but not in the style to which you've become accustomed. The company, under new management, my management, will make full restitution for your Discrepancies, quietly, discreetly. There will be no public scandal, but your career, your reputation in this city is over. He stared at me, aghast. Ruined, but not jailed, a different kind of prison. Mother, I said, turning to her, you will retain the family home for now, but your allowance will be significantly reduced. Perhaps you'll discover the joys of budgeting. Her face crumpled, but she nodded, too broken to argue. And Clara, I said, my gaze unwavering, you will find your own way. No more trust funds, no more relying on the family name or connections. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet or fall. The choice is yours. Clara looked like I'd slapped her. The prospect of actual work, of fending for herself, was clearly terrifying. Just then, Julian Sterling re-entered the ballroom, his timing impeccable as always. He walked towards us, his expression calm and professional. He addressed me, ignoring my family completely. Evelyn, Mr. Henderson is prepared to sign the revised merger agreement. On your terms, of course. He's waiting in the conference suite. My terms, not my father's, not the Hendersons' initial predatory offer. My terms, fair, equitable, and vastly profitable for Reed International. A profound weight, one I hadn't even fully realized I'd been carrying for 2 lifetimes, seemed to lift from my shoulders. I nodded at Julian. Thank you, Julian. I'll be right there. I turned back to my family, still kneeling or slumped in their chairs. This is where I leave you, I said. Live with the choices you made. Live with the consequences I've dictated. Do not attempt to contact me again. If you do, I will reconsider my leniency regarding this envelope. I tapped it lightly. Miss Albright will escort you out. I turned and walked away towards Julian, towards my future. My mother called my name, a desperate, pleading sound, but I didn't look back. Their voices faded as I stepped out of the ballroom and into the cool, quiet corridor leading to my new life. The final scene of my old life, and the first true scene of my new one, took place far from the city, far from the grasping hands and shadowed memories of the Vance family. I stood on a private beach, the sand golden and warm between my bare toes. A gentle breeze, carrying the clean, sharp scent of salt and untamed freedom, played with my hair. The sun was a molten globe sinking into the turquoise horizon, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange, soft lavender, and deep indigo. Julian stood beside me, no longer just the enigmatic business partner, but a genuine friend, an ally who had seen me at my most vulnerable and my most ruthless, and had inexplicably chosen to stand by me. He wasn't the mysterious entity from my rebirth, but he was, in his own way, a guardian of my second chance. It's done, he said quietly, handing me a sleek, minimalist smartphone. Not my old one, cluttered with their contacts and their demands, but a new one, a clean slate. On its screen was a single notification, a news alert from a financial wire service. Vance Industries formally announces dissolution, assets absorbed by Reed International following major restructuring. Founder Charles Vance retires amidst speculation. The final act of my revenge was complete, not with a bang, but with the quiet, legal dismantling of their legacy, their name erased from the business world, their power extinguished. A peaceful smile touched my lips. I took the phone from Julian, felt its cool, impersonal weight in my hand. For a moment, I considered keeping it, a symbol of my victory. But then, with a sudden liberating impulse, I drew my arm back and threw it, spinning end over end far out into the ocean. It hit the water with a small splash and disappeared beneath the waves. Truly free. Free from past obligations, future entanglements, and the incessant digital leash of the modern world. Julian raised an eyebrow but said nothing, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. I turned to face the new horizon, the endless expanse of the ocean mirroring the boundless possibilities that now stretched before me. The last vestiges of Alara Vance, the victim, the pawn, dissolved with the setting sun, leaving only Evelyn Reed, the architect of her own destiny. Some prices, I thought, as the first stars began to prick the darkening sky, can never be truly paid for the damage they inflict. Some debts, like the ones owed to a stolen life, should never, ever be forgiven. And some lives, lives reborn from the ashes of betrayal and despair, should be lived entirely, gloriously, and unapologetically for oneself. This life was mine, and it was just beginning.